for listening to Peak One Sports.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sports Page on the Peak One Sports Network. I'm Ashton, and back with me today, Chris Robb Jr. What's going on, Chris?
Oh, nothing much, man. How's it been?
It's been getting really busy lately.
Yeah.
Not only in life in general, but just sports is starting to ramp up. We went through a few weeks of baseball as being the only sport. I mean, you had NFL, NBA drafts, free agency things going on, but now NFL teams are going to training camp. You have the trade deadline today for Major League Baseball, a lot of things going down. And then obviously what we're talking about today, college football is ramping up. It's going to be, there's going to be a lot of notes and news on most of our shows on the Peak One Sports Network that we're just going to have a ton of stuff to talk about, and we're going to have to chop half of it away. Where it's more of a struggle, not necessarily a struggle, but we're having to find a lot of stuff to talk about over these dog days of summer. But here in a month or two, we're going to have to figure out what important things we're not going to be able to talk about, or just have really long shows in general.
Yeah, it's about that part of the time, like of year, where every sport will be in play at one point. So it's gonna get hectic for sure.
Yeah, all the major sports, at least here in America, all overlapping. Where I tend to put baseball like third tier on that. Like if you have to pick sports in terms of like news that we're talking about, but that. When you put Major League Baseball playoffs, MLB playoffs in there, it's a whole nother animal, right up there with the start of NFL. I mean, then throwing college football in there. College football is right up there with all the major sports. And then you have I mean, man, I would love to talk a lot of soccer, but there's just not time, and soccer's ramping up too.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's gonna get hectic. I'm excited though. I love this time of year.
Yeah, it's a very fun time of year. It's hard to relax and sit back. You know, we have all of this going on. This is the first year though where I've kind of been in charge of this whole network with all these different shows and different social medias. Typically, I've just had one show to deal with, one social media page, and now it's gonna get ridiculous. I don't even know if I'm prepared, but. We do have a lot of cool people here on the network working, including yourself, that contributes a whole lot. So I know I'm not alone in this. Be sure to subscribe to the Peak One Sports Network YouTube page, comment, and hit that notification button so you get an alert every time a new episode drops, and listen to all of the Peak One Sports shows however you listen to podcasts. And this episode is brought to you by Betalytics. Don't bet with your gut. The Betalytics dashboards allow you to quickly identify the top created best bets and hottest trends. Use promo code PEAK1 for 25% off when you sign up today. Go to Betalytics.com to start betting smarter. Now, I mentioned it earlier, or just a couple of minutes ago, that we were going to be diving into college football. That's just because a lot of news is keeps happening with conference realignment. I mean, there's all kinds of rumors. You could at this point really tell me any school and put them in a random conference, and it doesn't sound as ridiculous.
Right.
I mean, everyone's up for grabs right now, and no conference seems to be safe other than the Big Ten and the SEC. I know the Big 12 is making moves, but those are the only two that I can for sure tell you are going to be here in 5 years. What we know for sure, I mean, obviously we talked about it a couple months ago when we had our college realignment episode. But what we know now, past that's just happened in the last couple of weeks, is Colorado is leaving the Pac-12 and coming back to the Big 12 next year. And not this upcoming season, but in 2024. Of course, they left the Big 12 back in 2011. Now that's going to set up some precedents, because at least for the Big 12, you haven't had an odd number of teams. It's gone from, I guess you want to say the Big 8 when they merged with the Southwest Conference.
Yeah.
And they went to 12, down to 10 for a few years, back up to 12. They'll be at 14 this year because Texas and Oklahoma aren't quite leaving yet. So you got to think they're going to bring in another school. They're not going to stick at, what would it be, 13 teams? They're going to stay. And there's actually a college football insider that is claiming Arizona is going to join Colorado in moving to the Big 12 in 2024.
That wouldn't be too bad, yeah.
Yeah, saying a deal between Arizona and the Big 12 is all but done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would like that. I think I would like more of a, I guess, competitor. I know they've been competitive, spotty throughout the years, but
they're a top tier school for sure.
They're a really good school. They put out talent as well, and they have great facilities. So, yeah, that'd be cool. The whole thing about all these realignments with me are just like travel and like, it just doesn't really make sense. And we'll talk about it later, but that's not horrible. That's not like too outlandish.
Yeah, I mean, they're already getting BYU. I don't have a map in front of me, but just kind of like the geography in my head shows that, that's Utah's just right above Arizona. Right there anyway. So, if you're expanding there, it's not as ridiculous. We'll talk about it. Well, we'll talk about the Big Ten and what they're doing and possibly about to do here, which would stretch them all across the country more than they already are. But yeah, Arizona, it's only natural that they've been stuck with Arizona State. That it's going to be Arizona State are going to move. Then they throw Oregon and Washington are going to move. You had USC and UCLA move, which we talked about. To me, didn't make a whole lot of sense because it's all about the TV money. It's all about the regions, and like if you're going to have one, maybe it was a package deal. Maybe USC said they wouldn't go without UCLA. I don't know why, but when you're already getting the LA market, why would you try to go for the second? But I'm not an economist or an expert in the matter, but we've seen that even back when all the college realignment was happening in 2010, 2011, 2012, that when the Big 12 thought they were done, kind of like how the Pac-12 looks like it's going, where they had Oklahoma State tied together, they had Texas and Texas Tech tied together for some reason, they had TCU and Baylor tied together, but as we saw, Oklahoma's leaving Oklahoma State. They don't care.
Right. Yeah.
They're just going to go with Texas.
Yeah, and that does kind of ruin the the rivalry aspect of Bedlam game and everything. But you also got to think about whenever A&M left the Big 12. Whenever they first left. So that Thanksgiving game, I used to watch it every year. So
it feels kind of like parents getting a divorce because. The fans are football fans are the ones getting punished, not getting to see your teams play. And they had an interview with the Oklahoma State, his name's Gundy, Mike Gundy, something
Mike
like
Gundy.
That. Yeah, Mike Gundy. I want to say Jeff Van Gundy. I know that's not right. Asking him, why aren't y'all going to play anymore? Just because you're Georgia Tech play all the time. And he said, well, I'm just a football coach. I'm not in charge of the schedule and who we play, which is kind of true, but he definitely has a lot of say. He might be the most tenured NCAA football coach.
He's up there.
He's up there. He's been up there for, I just remember, I'm 40, and that was
that was
20 years ago.
Over 10 years ago, yeah.
That was a long time ago. So he would definitely have say, unless Oklahoma just said they didn't want to play, but it's just all pettiness for leaving. Like I've heard a lot saying that it's A&M's fault they're not going to play Texas, but it's Texas' fault that A&M's leaving because they had the Big 12 or the Longhorn Network and not the Big 12 network. I'm like, I don't care whose fault it is. Just play, just schedule it. It's Texas A&M. Texas finds a way to schedule Rice or UTEP every other year. So why can't you just throw Texas A&M in there? They play Alabama. They're going to play them again this year, and But that's pushed aside. That's going to be alleviated starting in 2024. They're finally going to play some more.
Yeah.
I don't know if Arizona joining the Big 12 is going to affect Arizona State. We don't know what's going to happen to the Pac-12 because all of this, of course, like I said, it's all TV money. It's the Pac-12's inability to finalize their new media deal is what all this drama is coming from. And then, the Big 12 and Big 10 are just poaching them. They're taking teams, obviously USC and UCLA are leaving, I believe, in 2024. And now Colorado is, and that puts them down to 9 teams if they don't expand. Possibly 8 if Arizona, I don't know that it's going to be Arizona, but I fully believe that there's going to be another team coming.
Yeah. Man, that's tough, especially now that, the SEC is gaining all those teams and the Big 12 is, gaining teams and to have a conference with 8 colleges, that just, you might have to disband at that point or something. I really don't know. I
mean, it just depends how it works now. I mean, I can't tell you what number of teams all the different conferences have, like the MAC conference, like the smaller conferences, which in and of itself, us talking about the Pac-12 with those conferences is an issue itself. But I mean, you had the Southwest Conference was 9, but they had 4 teams merge with the Big 8 when the Big 12 was just 8 teams. The Pac-12 used to be the Pac-8, but that was just a different time. I don't know. You can't be a major conference and have just 8 teams, not when those 8 teams aren't UCLA, USC. I mean, they're right now with what we know what's happening in 2024, what we know is happening, not rumors. In 2024, the biggest brands in the Pac-12 are going to be Oregon and Washington. And they said they're not leaving. They're loyal to their conference. I don't know if that's going to be true when money talks. And they've been rumored with the Big 10 and the Big 12 to come over as well. And I think we're going to see 16-team super conferences here in a few years. I don't know that the Pac-12 has to just up and fold. I don't know how that works. Why they just be a smaller conference, just kind of downgrade. But it's a big deal when okay, let's say Arizona does leave. You have 8. What 8 schools are that? Is that Washington and Oregon? We said Oregon State, Stanford. Is Cal's in the Pac-12?
Cal they're in the Pac-12.
Yeah. Stanford, Utah. That's 6. Should be 2 more. Arizona State, because if Arizona State doesn't leave now. And the last one's, comment down below if we don't end up answering who the 8th team will be. Can't think of it. It's bothering me now. Oh, Washington State? Washington State?
Yeah, Washington State.
Yeah, okay.
So that's it, right?
Yeah, that's like, Oregon's a good brand, and I think Nike's brought that on them. And, they did have, a decade reign of decent success, making, They didn't win a national championship. They made one. They made the Final Four, the first Final Four, or the first playoff. And they dominated there for a little bit.
Yeah.
But overall,
that's a good school. To have it as your staple school, when you compare it to like the SEC and again in Texas,
they can't be one of the. Yeah, exactly.
It's a little tough. But that's a great school to have as your best school or one of your best schools anyway. So, I wouldn't completely disband it. It's not like it's the Sun Belt or anything like that. But the Pac-12 having so much history and all of it is being brought down to, Oregon being the best team. It's a little.
I don't know that they would just make the decision, say, hey, we're done. That obviously isn't going to happen unless the conference goes bankrupt. But I don't know what all goes in the money side of it. But if you're a decent school, because if you, like I mentioned, the MAC conference, those Toledo and I think Central Michigan, maybe Western Michigan, those don't even compare when you're talking Utah, Stanford. I mean, Utah just
Right.
played in a major bowl game. They're
Mm-hmm.
still, big programs. And I don't know. I mean, we throw around the term major five conference, big five conferences,
Yeah,
or
Power Five.
Power Five.
Yeah.
There's nothing official that goes along with that necessarily towards bowl games or BCS. We don't do anymore. So you, I guess, lose your status as a Power Five conference,
Mm-hmm.
whatever that officially or unofficially means. But if you're losing all these teams, and now you have the Big 10, the Big 12, the SEC, and the ACC, which we'll talk about in a minute,
Mm-hmm.
have them scrambling for teams, they're gonna poach some of those other teams,
Yeah.
and that's when
Yeah.
you get in the thing. Well, like, hey, if we just have Washington State, Arizona State, Utah, and Cal, like, maybe it's more beneficial just to, I don't know what all. I know there's big money, and these big conferences are paying these schools all off
Yeah.
TV right deals.
Yeah.
But if you can't get anybody to watch, what are you going to do? Because there's no MAC network, there's no AAC network, there's no Southland Conference network. Those just
Mm-hmm.
have deals with ESPN and a couple of
ESPN too, and yeah.
maybe like Fox or some of those weird channel, Fox Sports,
Mm-hmm.
FS1 or whatever.
Yeah.
They don't have networks, so they're not. If you can't, if Stanford, which is a big name football program, it's Stanford.
Yeah.
If they're not going to get that money, but hey, the Big 12 is going to pay me, I'm going to go to the Big 12. I'm going to do what I have to do as a football conference because that's how you survive today. We're talking about scholarships. That money directly feeds into having the right amenities, the stadium, can be not only be able to give out those scholarships, but making those kids want to come play at Stanford. And you saw with what happened with TCU when they coming from, Conference USA to however all that, because I know the Conference USA is basically like the AAC now, the All-American Conference, but the Conference USA kind of downgraded, but it still exists.
Mm-hmm.
But you saw when they went to the Big 12, they had success, and they've had off years here and there, but overall, the level of competition, the money, they're doing a lot better.
Especially last year, yeah.
Yeah, especially last year.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's not necessary. It's hard dependent on anybody. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know the politics, the business that goes into getting your media deals set up, your TV deals set up. I will tell you, it's probably has to do with it being on the West Coast, because when a game kicks off at 10 o'clock at night on the East Coast, you're less likely to get those views.
That's tough. Yeah, I've always said that too. Like it's always just tough timing whenever, because you just finished watching the primetime game or on ABC or whenever the SEC has theirs on CBS, and then Utah's playing somebody at 10:30 p.m. and it's like, I'm going to bed.
Yeah.
Like I
mean, I like it because you have from 11 a.m. all the way to past midnight, you have games on. Yeah. And I don't care what that matchup is. It could be Washington versus Cal. Mm-hmm. I'll probably have it on if I'm, on a Saturday night. If I'm
Boise State playing somebody, I'm like, I watch those games though.
Yeah.
But it's tough. I'm definitely winding down at that point.
I'm glad you brought up Boise State, because that's one of the teams that if the Pac-12 is going to make a move to show their members, their schools, that they're going to do something about this,
I will try to do it.
Maybe a decade too late, but I think Boise State should have, whether it was the Pac-12 or Boise State or whatever, I don't remember back then. Mm-hmm. But I think that's an obvious choice. Throw Boise State in there. Hawaii's an interesting one. I don't know. Hawaii's a really popular school for the amount of success they've had. Mm-hmm. Logistically, there's obvious issues there. Mm-hmm. If you're going to add Hawaii, you can't go off and do what the Big Ten is doing and add a Midwest team or whatever. That's just, because it's already like a 7 or 8 hour flight from Hawaii to Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's a little less than that.
Yeah.
But yeah, after UCLA and USC are leaving, I don't know that UCLA's. It's hard to believe they're the second biggest brand in that conference. But that conference, if you go up and down, it's not astounding. You have USC and
No.
then Oregon's had a lot of success kind of keeping that. And then
Mm-hmm.
you randomly have Stanford does good. Washington had a good stint there. But now, let's kind of shift to the Big Ten because they're snatching up anyone and everything. They don't care where they're
They don't care
located.
where they are yet.
We mentioned it our last college realignment episode that time zone, not only the regions, the metro areas, or where they want to be on TV, it's the time zones because you have games starting at certain times, and that gives you the ability to, hey, throw in another national game possibly, where the Big Ten's mostly East Coast, East time zone, and I guess some Central. But now they're throwing that Pacific time zone with
Yeah.
USC and UCLA.
All over the country, yeah.
Yeah. And now potentially moving into Florida as Florida State announces. Was it Florida State that announced it? Somebody announced, a news source announced that Florida State has interest in exiting the ACC for the Big Ten.
That's weird. That's so weird.
It's a weird matchup. I pegged them that, okay, because we talked about the ACC possibly having issues similar to the Pac-12, that they would be SEC material,
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, definitely.
Not only regionally, but
regionally, and like they've probably for the last decade been a top 10 program or so. Like, they had those championship runs with Jameis, and then, they've always been, really good for the most part. And I don't, that's just so like just going all the way up playing like Ohio State and Michigan and weather-wise, like geographically, like I get why the Big Ten is doing it. Like, why not? It's only one, and some of the teams are in the Eastern Time Zone, so
and it's the Big Ten. The Pac-12. If the name matters at all, because I know Boise State was set to join the Big East at one point, as well as TCU, the first time this all went around. But when you have a name like the Big 10 or Big 12 or whatever, it doesn't matter. Do what you want.
Yeah.
But when you have the Pac-12 or the ACC, the Atlantic Coast Conference, it's kind of weird when you do things like
Down
that.
West, like teams, like just like those type of I see what you're saying.
Yeah, tradition just gets thrown out, and I'm not a big traditionalist in the sense that, man, I hate change. I think it's kind of cool. I like the chaos. But the reason I thought, Florida State's going to the SEC if the ACC goes down was who's the other team in the ACC, at least in football? Well, I know we forget other sports, but football kind of runs college sports. The other team in that conference is, let's say Auburn, is Clemson.
Yeah.
And Clemson has that history now with Alabama that, man, move Clemson to the SEC. Then you have them, I don't know how they can work at the conferences where you make that a special game, or in the divisions of the conferences, make that a special game every year, every other year, whatever. And then, pair them together, Clemson and Florida State, throw them. And those clearly, well, I don't know. Miami might be a bigger brand than Florida State. I don't know. I think Florida State's, has more history than Miami. Miami's more recent in the 80s.
I know Miami had the higher peak, maybe, like, the early 2000s team.
Yeah, if we're talking about, like overall history, Florida State has the older. Miami was not a lot until the 80s. And then they peaked back up in the early 2000s. And but still, I think Florida State, if you were to pick Miami or Florida State, I think you'd pick Florida State as your brand if you had that option. But I say Clemson, and that's another Big Ten target is Clemson, potentially or supposedly.
Yeah, that's that would be interesting because Clemson's a really good program.
Clemson would be kind of cool matchups like Clemson, Ohio State,
Clemson, Michigan. That would be It would almost feel like the playoffs, like like that, like those type of matchups. That'd be pretty. That'd be pretty cool.
I know South Carolina is right there with Florida, state-wise, like not the schools, but like where Clemson's located.
Yeah.
And even Florida State's in the north side, or near Tallahassee.
Yeah, they're like the top left.
Yeah.
Corner. Yeah,
So
like,
really, Clemson and Florida State are very close. But
mhm.
when I just think of it in my head, I'm like, Big Ten, South Carolina, that's not too far of a stretch.
Yeah.
And again, yeah, I know I hated it when Texas A&M left, and I don't necessarily like Texas is leaving the Big 12. I'm still gonna be a Texas fan. You can see the Longhorns deal right here. No, funny joke. If you watch a few episodes when we talked about Rob Manfred when Landon was on producing, I put that over there, not intentionally. I mean, I didn't even think about it, but he's a Texas A&M fan, and so his
really?
first time on camera at the Peak One Sports Network, he had the Texas Longhorns thing as his background. So
That's
now
cool.
he brought over when we did the lead off, when he's producing the lead off Saturday, he brought over, which you can see if you watch that. I'm not going to turn the camera around, but he brought a Aggies fans parking only sign to put there, which I'm fine with. So I'm just looking at an Aggies thing sitting here in my studio. But nevertheless, I understand that I'm not a loyalist to the Big Ten, the ACC, these other schools. It doesn't necessarily bother me that USC is leaving the Pac-12. I'm not thinking like this. I'm a huge traditionalist. This is a travesty, and I'm sure if I was old enough, it would bother me with the Southwest Conference split up. But it doesn't, because those aren't my schools.
Right.
I think it's cool having different matchups, because I'm always been a fan of having all the bowl games. I get it; they're completely meaningless, but I like seeing all the weird matchups you'd never normally see.
Like the first time, second time in school history that they played. Like I do love those. I love those.
Yeah, and and I know they kind of watered it down a little bit. You know, Texas is playing Alabama now. They're putting them on their schedule, which I guess is cool. It's just replacing one of those cupcake scheduled games, which if your team loses, you're like, man, I'd rather have that cupcake team. But it puts together better football. I'll tell you, in the last probably 6 or 7 years, the early on college football schedule has gotten a lot better. You'd have a couple of really big matchups to kick it off.
Oh yeah, I think they're trying to do like the college football kickoff where they have, two premier teams, either two top 10 teams,
you have
top 15 teams that play each other early. So I remember who was Alabama playing like week 1? They were playing either Michigan or they were playing like somebody like week 1 where it was like number 1 versus number 4 or something like that.
I know Cowboys Stadium I think it was called the Cowboys Classic. I think they're still doing that.
Yeah.
I know one year they didn't here in the last couple of years, but it's always like Oregon, LSU, TCU. I mean, it's pretty good matchups.
Florida State. So yeah.
Alabama played there a couple of times. And I know there's a couple others. I think Houston has one. There might be one in the Orange Bowl. I'm sure there's one at the Rose Bowl or something like that.
Yeah.
So you have a lot better matchups. I think that Texas, Alabama might be week 2. I think that's what it was last year, week 2 or 3.
It's a big game.
And you're still going to have those cupcake games. But
that's a big game. Like the preseason rankings haven't come out yet, have they?
I don't believe so.
Okay, yeah.
I think I saw like Peak One Sports could come out with their own, but I think I saw the way too early preseason rankings, but it doesn't take a lot to account. Like, I guess I don't know what else would you have to account for now? I mean, you pretty much have most things set up.
Yeah, I think.
I guess seeing how they do in training, but
that Texas Alabama matchup, I'm predicting they put Texas in the top 10, so it'll be an early top 10 matchup. That'll be a good one.
Yeah,
it was a great game last year.
Because it was such a close game last year, and Ewers got hurt, and now he's back, and I think Texas' season would have gone a lot differently last year if Ewers doesn't get hurt.
Me too. They lost all their games were within 7 points. So
yeah, and they lost Texas Tech and Alabama were their first early losses, and maybe one more in there. But they were all close losses to decent teams, and then they struggled with not great teams, but Ewers was kind of
Yeah.
off, and I believe Ewers didn't even play the Texas Tech game. I may be wrong. I'm not trying to be a homer and rub it.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be as unbiased as possible, but obviously when I have a Texas Longhorns banner right there, and
Yeah.
I can only be not trying to hide anything, but I mean, the like we mentioned earlier, we don't know what the Pac-12 is going to do to try to expand or do whatever. I know they mentioned that they were finally showing their media rights. I don't know if it's a proposal or what deal they have now. So I know that was going to be a big story here this week. But the ACC is also looking to expand. I thought when I saw the Florida State thing, it was done. Apparently it's not. I mean, I was doing some research and it just says probable or potential. So maybe it's not done just yet. I don't know. It didn't say what teams ACC would be looking for. I would like to think like, okay, here's some obvious ones, but who knows? When we're talking about Clemson and Florida State going to the Big Ten, it could be if Utah's maybe going to the ACC or something. I know Utah did. That was a joke, but I know Utah did say that they have no interest in going to the Big 12. Again, things could change. Maybe the Big Ten wants to scoop them up now. But what schools kind of look like that might be good for the ACC? I know probably nobody from the Big 10, nobody from the Big 12, nobody from the SEC, obviously. You're probably picking up, like the Big 12 did, you're picking up schools that have had lower tier schools that have had a lot of success. Like I mean Houston, Cincinnati, BYU, and UCF all have had success recently. So you're probably picking up teams like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess regionally, what would you consider Atlantic? Technically, wouldn't Florida State being in Tallahassee, they're closer to the Gulf of Mexico, is the closest body of water than the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're not considering that as the Atlantic Ocean, I don't know. But I mean, what teams are you gonna take?
I'm surprised no one's tried to reach out to Notre Dame, or they probably have, and I'm not sure. They have their own thing though with the NBC and they just
I wouldn't be surprised if a conference said, "Hey, you can keep that."
If you come to our conference.
Then again, I don't know. Are every single one of their games on NBC? I know they have their own broadcast team and everything. Jason Garrett's on there.
Yeah, I think so. They have like a deal with NBC. So
I mean, outside of I guess if they played a premier game on ESPN or something.
Yeah, because I remember. I'm sure they do because I watched the Notre Dame versus Rice game. Yeah. So I'm assuming all of them are, because that's just a random game to have on NBC. So that's interesting, and they're just a brand in itself, and I think because they play all the military schools too, like they would like to stay independent. So you never know. But I know in basketball they're in the
ACC. Yeah,
the ACC.
Like obviously I know we've already mentioned multiple times that regional issues don't even matter anymore, but regionally we mentioned it, the Big Ten would make a lot of sense for Notre Dame. Yeah. And then the aspect where in other sports they're in the ACC. I don't know I guess if the ACC was at the risk of just losing their conference, they were kind of like in a Pac-12 type sense. Where Clemson would stay and Florida State would stay if you brought Notre Dame in. But you really couldn't offer them anything in terms of TV deals, because I don't have the deals in front of me of what ACC and Notre Dame, but I would assume Notre Dame has such a better deal. That's why they're an independent. And the ACC, if you label, between the SEC, ACC, Big 12, and Big 10, the ACC is probably fourth in that list. In terms of premier and tier and probably ratings as well. ACC, that's the one where the basketball is probably better than, I mean, obviously talent wise. I mean, you can make that case for the Big 12 right now as well, but I'm just saying, when you think of the conference, what's the first thing that pops in your head? And you're probably thinking, basketball with Duke and North Carolina are bigger basketball schools than any football school. Like maybe not Clemson, but you have so many more premier teams at basketball. Basketball is your number one sport, or at least in terms of between basketball and football. Big 12, definitely the ACC and the Big 10, they're all football conferences, even though they've had success in other sports.
Definitely.
But those are teams. So you would think that Notre Dame, being a football powerhouse, wouldn't necessarily go to the ACC. I mean, that's probably why, being such a big brand, they didn't go to the Big 10 in basketball. They went to the bigger, the ACC.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
I don't know that for a fact. That's just kind of me rambling on and thoughts popping up in my head. And like, if you see a little light bulb pop up, you're like, you know what, that makes sense. These aren't notes or anything. But yeah, what, everyone who's listening right now, comment, let us know what y'all's thoughts are. Like, give us your, maybe what you think might happen, maybe what you think makes sense, but go ahead and give us your ridiculousness. Just go ahead and type in all 5 conferences and what teams need to go where. What would be cool? Just show us the chaos, but
definitely, let's see it. Yeah,
and tell us if do you think Oregon, Washington, Utah might leave the Pac-12? Tell us if they're making a mistake. Is Arizona going to leave it? That news may break before this is up on YouTube. You don't know. That's probably the recorded podcast, but a lot going on in college football. A lot of realignment. Chris, any final thoughts before we get out of here on anything we talked about or anything we want to bring up?
Not really. My power rankings are coming out though. I have started like a power ranking top 5 positions like in basketball, like of all time. So I started that this week, and then
that's
MLB
cool.
Power rankings. Yeah, the MLB power rankings will be out today. So just everybody just keep an eye out on those. But that's pretty much it. Excited for all the upcoming sports. So
awesome. Thank you for listening, guys. Go ahead and give us a follow. Social media. You see all of our social media options, personal and network wise. Be sure to subscribe, follow, listen to us every time, and listen to all of our other shows here on the Peak One Sports Network. Until next time, we'll see you later.
all right, see you guys.